everybody, I'm Liz, this is French Toast and Books, and today I want to do the 30 books I want to read before I turn 30. On Sunday I turned 29, which means I have a little less than a year to read these books, and I am so thrilled. I hope I can get to them. The first book is I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai, and I really want to read this memoir. I know she's a very influential person, especially in the Muslim community and in the education community. I really want to read more about her story and dive more into her head, especially because I know that she has been under attack in some communities because of her ideals. And after finishing Infidel by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, I really want to dive more into all that cultural standpoints, especially because Ayaan kind of went away from the religion and became a bit of an atheist, and I believe Malala is still a practicing Muslim, so I want to see their differences and all of that stuff. Next is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Addo-Lodge. I wanted to read this book ever since I bought it during the big political marches 2 years ago in summertime, where there was a lot of craziness going on. I never ended up getting to it. I still haven't, and I really, really want to. I feel like I've learned so much with a lot of these books, and it's really just kind of turned how I feel about politics and racism, especially growing up in a predominantly white area in Utah. So I really, really need to dive more into it. The third book is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the last book in her Shades of Magic trilogy, although she has renewed to do a continuation trilogy after this book. I have very mixed feelings about this series, and I've had that with A Darker Shade of Magic, and I've had that with The Gathering of Shadows, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about this book, and I hope it's a solid last book, because I felt like A Gathering of Shadows fell with that sequel tropes and sequel slumpiness, and so I really, really want this to kind of blow me away, because of this has a very, I feel like, a polarizing series. Either people love it and rave about it, which I hear that most of the time, or some people are just like, meh. But then most of the people who are meh with these books are meh with most of other V.E. Schwab's writings, and I like V.E. Schwab's other stuff that I have read, and so that's why I'm really hoping that I will like this book. The fourth book is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. I have heard mostly positive things about Amanda Foody's works, especially in regards to bi representation and I think a few other things, but that's what primarily makes me really interested in her works, is because I know bi representation isn't in a lot of stories, and so that's why I definitely want to read more stories with it. I've heard stellar things about this book, and so I really want to dive into her works with this one. This one is with casinos and gangs and a girl of high-class society who needs to find her kidnapped mother, which puts her into the City of Sin, which is where all the casinos and the gangs are, and she has to play the games in order to save her mom, and she gets mixed up with a ruffian, a bad boy, and so it sounds really interesting, and I'm hoping I will enjoy it. The fifth book is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This is another kind of polarizing author, though I feel like it's primarily stellar reviews. And I won this book doing a video for the last, I believe it was the last biannual Bibliothon. I dressed up as Professor Trelawney from the Harry Potter series and did shit divination, enthusiasts say, And so I poked a lot of fun into direct quotes from the Harry Potter books of Professor Trelawney, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's like an embarrassing fun 2-minute video. I was excited to get this book, and I have sadly not read it yet. It sounds like it's a pretty tough topic. It involves a rural, kind of small town hockey team, and everyone on the hockey team is very well revered. But I believe, if I am catching kind of the back synopsis correctly, a girl is raped by a member of the team, and everyone kind of tries to hush it up, but she won't let it happen, and it kind of throws this town into turmoil. So let's dive in to see if my assumptions are correct or if I'm totally off base. The 6th book is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchison. I've had this book on my radar for many, many years. I really want to dive into it. It sounds like a really great kind of think process of a story where our main character, Henry, is visited by aliens, and he basically has to decide whether to destroy the human race or keep it fighting. There's, I guess, a lot of things in his past that makes it a difficult challenge, and so I'm very much intrigued by the premise. Next up, we have Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is the 7th book on the list, and I have been obsessed with wanting to read this book ever since I found out about it several years ago, and I want to read it so bad. It involves a lot of like Icelandic history, mythology, and kind of like that small town tropes and dilemmas. And so essentially this book takes place where Agnes is charged and convicted of murdering 2 men. So she is sent to this rural, isolated farmhouse in Iceland, waiting her execution. The family that houses her is very much against this, and so they kind of leave her alone. But as the execution draws near, the family kind of gets that second side of the story, and it kind of challenges everything, and so it just sounds really heartbreaking but very interesting, and I've heard stellar things about this book. The 8th book on this list is Nyxia Uprising by Scott Rankin. This is the last book in the Nyxia trilogy. It's a sci-fi, like, space mining story where these teens compete in a challenge to mine this very, very rare and necessary item from a planet far away, and they find out that this company that's supposed to take care of them and keep their family healthy and prosperous has been essentially lying to them, and they're uncovering a lot of stuff in this mad dash to mine this precious commodity. And it does dive into so many difficult topics, especially when the case of like children dying and like the trauma of dealing with these very hard topics when you're so young. And so I want to finish the story and see how it ends so badly. The 9th story is The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer by Michelle Hodkin. This was a beloved series back when I started my channel like 6, almost 7 years ago, and I never got into it. Now it's getting a bit more mixed reviews, especially with books further on in the series, but I'm still very intrigued. It's kind of a urban fantasy, psychological, like thrillery type story, if I'm thinking and reading and remembering correctly. Our main character, Mara Dyer, is saved from drowning, I believe, but somebody else doesn't. And then there's this whole mystery surrounding everything and how she survived and what happened and all of that stuff. And I need to see what the buzz is about so that I can either enjoy or have other thoughts about the story. The 10th book is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is the 2nd book in, I believe, a trilogy. The first book is called Scythe, and the first book dives into this kind of utopian society where nobody dies, but they still have to population control, and so people become scythes to cull the population at like randomly, it seems. I don't exactly know how it happens. So the first book has 2 scythe apprentices learning the trade and all of that stuff, and mayhem happens, and then we have the sequel. And I really want to dive into this book. I struggle with a lot of death topics because I fear death so much, and so I really like kind of this inner tugging that I have when I read books that primarily center around death, not just death, but specifically people killing others because they have to, and all sorts of stuff like challenging mortality or immortality. And so I really am excited to dive back into this series and this world. The 11th book is Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. I adore the Kiss of Deception series by the same author, and I really want to dive into this one. I believe it's kind of a continuation, or it's at least set in the same universe as A Kiss of Deception, and that's really all I know about the story, and I still want to dive in. I need to read it. It's a duology, and I've heard a lot of stellar things about this book series, and I want to dive back into the prose and the mythology and the rich world that Mary E. Pearson creates. And so I just gotta do it. And the 12th book is The Golem and the Genie by Helene Wecker. This is another like really beloved, I feel like, series in the book communities, and I've heard so many good things. It's been recommended based upon other books I have read and really enjoyed, and so I just really want to dive into this. And so just reading it to brush up about what this story is about. We have 2 people who become friends and soulmates, and it weaves this mystical tale. There's Yiddish and Middle Eastern folklore, mythology, and history woven into the story, and that just sounds really beautiful. The 13th book is Lifelike by J. Kristoff. I really want to make a dent in a lot of the books I own, and I did start reading this. I got probably about 3 chapters in, and I didn't like the first chapter, but the more I kept reading, the more I kept enjoying the story, and I put it down because it also kind of wasn't my scene at the moment at the end of last year. So I really want to dive back into the book when I'm feeling more of a high-stakes sci-fi mech battle type book. The 14th book is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I absolutely adored Uprooted from her, and I started this book probably 3 times last year and kept putting it down or forgetting about it. I, according to this bookmark, am 82 or 83 pages in, and that is the farthest I've gotten. It is a very interesting premise. It talks a lot about the Jewish community, specifically the Jewish community in areas where Jewish people are persecuted. I think this primarily takes place in kind of a Russian small town, and it's also a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. So it's a lot of elements that are very fascinating to me. We have kind of a forever winter that is choking the life out of the town. There's this whole mythical aspect of things where these other race or mystical beings that take money and lives if they can't pay up. At least that's what I gleaned for like the first 80 pages. And the writing is still so beautiful. I love the world and how expansive it is. I don't know why I kept putting it down and forgetting about it. I'm very sad that I kept doing that. And the 15th book is Warrior of the Wild by Trisha Levenseller. I read Trisha Levenseller's debut series, The Daughter of the Pirate King, a couple years ago. Absolutely loved it. And I've always been intending to get to this book just haven't yet. I have been reading the webtoon graphic novelization of Warrior of the Wild, which I love. The art's beautiful, the story is fantastic, and the comments are very, very positive with the imaginings and the creative license that the creators of the webtoon have been doing, and I am so intrigued. I really want to read this to get a good idea of how Trisha envisions the story and how it differs from the graphic novel. This book centers around a girl named Rasmira. She is the daughter of her Norse village leader, and she wants to be a warrior. So she undertakes the trial to become a warrior and fails due to things that happen, even though she was a shoo-in to win the trial. And in doing so, she has to leave her village and undertake a task in order to prove her merit, because now she's banished from her community in order to come back. And her merit is killing a god. The 16th book is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. This is a kind of cross-generational story where it takes place in 1990 in Palestine, and then in 2008 in Brooklyn. We have both women are basically at that cusp of age where they need to start finding a husband, even though that's not their priority at the moment, and so they're pressured by family to do so. And it seems like the Palestine story is the mom of the Brooklyn story, because the woman gets married and then has to move to Brooklyn and navigate not only this culture shock of moving from Palestine to America, but then also navigating being a new wife and all of that stuff. And now we have those pressures put onto a new generation and how all of that intersects and intermingles. The 17th book is The Map of Salt and Stars by Zane Jokater. And this book I've had on my shelves forever. It was very, very sensationalized and popularized years ago. I tried reading it 3 years ago in Scotland, and I couldn't get past the first page. It was not for me at that point in time, and so I put it down. I still really want to get into it. I want to try again. It is a very lyrical story about a girl going and finding maps, and I believe it's the 12th century, and there's fantasy and mythology. She goes on to this voyage across, I believe, North Africa, maybe the Middle East. I really need to read the synopsis again. And it gets her into a lot of trouble. There's bandits and all this other stuff. And it sounds so beautiful. The 17th book is Girls Burn Brighter, a novel by Shubha Rao. I had this book on my radar, a debut, I believe it was 2018. And I had all intentions of reading it, and it just didn't happen. And so this story takes place where these sisters, their mother dies, and one sister tries to kind of take up the mantle of the family, ends up getting captured and kidnapped, and so this other sister is on a mad dash race to find and rescue her sister, and it takes her from the deep dark underworld of India to Seattle. And so it's a huge cross-continental journey and struggle for life, sisterhood, family. Next we have The Plague by Joanne Dame. This book has been on my anticipated lists, my I need to get to this by the end of the year, for many, 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 many years. It's astounding that I have not read this book yet. It's a fantasy story, takes place in like the Middle Ages-ish, and the main character is a doppelganger to the princess, and so she's a stand-in for whenever the princess has to, be careful and be safe with her life. A plague sweeps the nation and ends up actually killing the princess, and so our main character has to decide whether to tell people that the princess died, which could lead in her beheading, because it's her sole responsibility, this princess, or she stands in as the princess, overtakes her role, and pretends to be her for the rest of her life. Next, we have The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I have heard so many stellar things about this book. Truth be told, I have not read the actual synopsis of this book until right now. I just got on it because everybody raved about it and it sounded like something I wanted, and so I read the synopsis just now, and it sounds beautiful. It reminds me a lot of Sadie without the kind of revenge journey. Basically, we have three main characters thrown together, predominantly surrounding Alex, one of the main characters. So her sister is murdered, but the murderer walks free for some reason or another, and it puts Alex in this very kind of tough exterior, and she isolates herself from her community. But then she meets some other characters during her senior year, and they kind of get thrown together. We have the class valedictorian, and then the preacher's child, and I guess there was a party one night. Alex lets kind of her rage and anger loose, and it throws these people together. Things get crazy. It sounds like a high school drama. Next, we have Wither by Lauren DeStefano. This is the first book in the Chemical Garden trilogy. I have 2 of those 3 books, and it feels very kind of old YA, like dystopian, and I kind of want to dive back into that type of genre. Essentially, the story has a genetic virus where people are dying very, very rapidly. Basically, men only live to about 25 years old, women till 20, and so it's this mad dash to save the population, and so women are married off younger to have babies, keep the population going while they find this antidote for the virus that's killing their population. It sounds wild. Next, we have Rainbirds by Clarissa Goenwan. This book grabbed my attention right before it released, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. I have not picked it up yet, sadly. I don't know why. This book centers around Ren. He is nearly completed with his graduate degree, but he drops all of that because of the violent death of his sister. He travels to her rural small town, many, many leagues away from where he is previously lived, and tries to kind of figure out what happened to his sister, but in the process of doing so, kind of embodies and lives her life through living in her residence, working in her job, meeting the people that she knew, and befriending them, and it unravels this crazy story. The next book is King of the Screw-Ups by K.L. Going. This book has sat on my shelf for many years, and it has our main character who's Mr. Popularity, but in all the things that he does leading up to his senior year of high school, he screws up so many things, and finally his father's had enough and kicks him out of the house. So his uncle takes him in, and the description of his uncle I'm kind of here for. His gay glam rocker disc jockey takes him in And so for Liam, our main character's senior year of high school, he can decide to either remake himself in the image that his father wants, which is kind of the nerdy, good at school exceller, or be who he truly is. Next, we have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This book is raved about so much in the book community, with the mythology, the prose, the fantastic world that is built within this hunk of a book. This place takes place in 18th century Cairo. Our main character, Nari, is kind of a con artist on the streets, swindling people to make money, and she doesn't believe in magic until she accidentally summons a djinn warrior, and all sorts of things happen. Next we have Eleanor by Jason Gurley. This book sounds so heartbreakingly devastating. It is a cross-generational story, and I just gotta read so I can get the timelines correct. We have 1962 in Anchor Bend, Oregon, where the sea calls to Eleanor and beckons her from the heart of the town she's always known from her husband and from her young daughter Agnes. And then in 1985, Agnes has grown up. She has a daughter named Eleanor, who's 6 years old, has an identical twin Esmeralda, but to Agnes, her daughter Eleanor is a constant reminder of the past of her mother. And then in 1993, Eleanor is now 14. Her mother is an alcoholic that she cares for, but Eleanor's reality starts to unravel. She loses grip with time, and I feel like that could possibly mean that the Eleanor of the past is the same as the future. I don't know. It sounds very interesting, and I really kind of want to dive into that mystery of a synopsis from this inner dust jacket. And next we have Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Nhan. This is the sequel to her debut story, Girls of Paper and Fire. I absolutely loved the story, and I so want to dive back into it. The main premise is we have girls are selected to come to the Emperor's kingdom, basically to become his concubines, and two of the girls brought there fall in love, so we have a little bit of a sapphic story. Next we have Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. I was so excited when I heard about this story. I am very fascinated by the premise of what happens after the Chosen Ones save their world or save their country, and especially when they're young when they do it, if they're teenagers, and how that trauma impacts them growing up. So that's a lot of what's going to happen in this book. We have 5 teens that were prophesied to bring an end to the Dark One and save their government from collapse, their community as a whole. But obviously that left them with a lot of struggles, particularly our main character Sloane. And then the 10th year anniversary of them defeating the Dark One happens, and on that 10th year anniversary, one of the 5 dies. And at this funeral of this Chosen One, they discovered that the Dark One's plans were way more sinister, way more involved, and were not stopped by his supposed defeat. And the next book is, I think, the only classic that is on this list, and that's The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I have not ever read this book. I've always wanted to. What I know about the story of Dorian Gray is very fascinating to me. Most of what I know takes place in kind of other types of stories. Like we have The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, there's The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. They all take from this original story. The next book is Kirakira by Cynthia Kadohata. This sounds like a really kind of heartbreaking tale. I believe it's a children's story. We have a family that go from a Japanese community in Iowa to the deep south of Georgia, and it's a bit of a culture shock because people stop and stare at them on the street. And then one of the sisters becomes ill and the family begins to fall apart, and so this girl, Katie, tries to find a way to remind them all of their bonds, their joy in life, and kind of keep them together and remind them that there is a future, there is love, there's family, and that just sounds so beautiful. And the last book is Bridge of Souls by Victoria or D.E. Schwab. This is the last book in the Cassidy Blake trilogy. She is a young, I think, teenage girl who can see ghosts. Her parents are like docu-series filmmakers and historians, and they go around the world to the most haunted cities of the world. So they start off in Edinburgh, then they go to Paris, and now they're in New Orleans. And so much has happened in Cassidy Blake's life in this series, just overall, over a summer, and I am so ready to dive back in. There you have it. 30 very vastly different stories that I need to dive into, I want to dive into, and I hope to dive into for the next year, for before I turn 30. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and in the comments down below, tell me one or a collection of books that you are most excited to read and get through, hopefully before the next year. And until next time, remember, I love you. Bye!